Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I take this opportunity to say that I'll be sharing my time with my colleague from Vancouver Centre. Mr. Speaker, I find myself in the, I suppose, not unusual position for me, but nevertheless one where I'm swimming against the tide. I have no doubt at all that there is a need for us to take the issue of victims and victims' rights very seriously. And I think if we were to look back at how the law could be improved, this would be one area where I think we can all agree. But when I look at the legislation overall, and in the discussions that I've had over the last several weeks with a number of groups involved with the issues of mental health and mental illness, I find myself unable to recommend to my colleagues that we vote in favor of this legislation, even on second reading. And I know when I say that there will be members who will be struck in disbelief and others who will be saying, well, surely you recognize that dangerous people should be kept off the street. And my answer to that is, of course, and they are. The fact of the matter, the facts are these, Mr. Speaker. The defense of insanity, the recognition that people who are not able to judge the consequences of their acts and are not able to say whether they're right or wrong, and are found to be either not able to even to stand trial or else are found to be not criminally responsible, has been a foundation of our criminal justice system in the common law world for hundreds of years. It is a basic principle of the criminal law that people who can understand the consequences of their actions and have the necessary intent should be found to be criminally responsible, and others have to be treated in a different way, not simply set free, as some in the sort of use of stereotypes might like to make people believe, but rather are kept away from society and today, as we try to deal with these issues, hopefully treated and rehabilitated in such a way that they're able to be reintegrated successfully in society. And it was Madam Justice McLaughlin who, in consideration of a case before the court, said, before she became Chief Justice, she said, treatment and not incarceration is necessary to stabilize the mental condition of a dangerous NCR accused and reduce the threat to public safety created by that condition. That was in the so-called Winco case. Mr. Speaker, until the early 90s, the rule was that you were held at will under a lieutenant governor's warrant. Lieutenant governor established in the provinces a review committee, but there were really no clear criteria that established how would incarceration suddenly end. And it was in response to a decision of the Supreme Court in the Swain case that said that the protection of the public was not guaranteed by that practice, that then said we have to establish a new system. And the basis of the new system was to say we're first of all not punishing people because they're not capable of being punished. And I'm glad that the Minister of Natural Resources emphasized that in the speech that he gave. We're not punishing people. We are incarcerating people for the protection of the public. Yes, of course, public safety is an absolutely important concern that we all have and all share. No one wants to see public safety in any way, shape, or form compromised, but also to allow people to become rehabilitated because they were not capable of understanding what they were doing, and we want to put them in a condition where they're going to be able to understand what they're doing, and understand, of course, that this is an area of life that's full of fear and insecurity, of mythologies and misunderstandings, and in which it's only too easy from time to time to say, we have a hot button, let's press it. I certainly believe, Mr. Speaker, and I share entirely the comments that have been made by members of both the Conservative and the New Democratic parties, that it is entirely legitimate for us to take the concerns of victims far more seriously than we have done in the past, and I can say as somebody who's been in government, have made every effort to do that when it was important for us to do that in terms of victim statements and courts taking what's happening to victims much more seriously than they have. But we also have to understand, Mr. Speaker, that we live in a society that's governed by the rule of law, in which you cannot incarcerate people indefinitely without providing for due process, which is what the court told us in 1991. There has to be due process. And the government will argue that, well, we provided for due process and the process that we're establishing is perfectly adequate. And I have to say to the government, I'm not sure you've been able to do that. In fact, I've recommended strongly to my colleagues when I was in a position to recommend something to my colleagues that we, in fact, not support this legislation, although I knew, and I said to them, this will not be politically popular. This will not be a winner with people, because when you press a button like this, you will get a response from the public. But I say to my colleagues in the Conservative Party as well as in the New Democratic Party, both parties are now supporting this legislation, let's not manufacture a crisis which does not exist. There is no crisis in public safety. It doesn't exist. The evidence is not there that justifies the sense that if you've been committed a horrible crime and you are mentally ill, that you are any more likely than anyone else to commit that crime again. In fact, the opposite. The rate of recidivism for those people who found to be not criminally responsible is 4% for those people who've been given an absolute discharge. For people who've left prison, it's 44%. And the fact of the matter is you can't incarcerate people indefinitely. You have to have a process which respects the rights of the individual as well as the rights of society. That's the balance we have to strike. Naturellement, Monsieur le Président, il y aura des situations difficiles. Il y aura des situations émotionnelles. Et nous le voyons. Mais les gens qui ont une maladie mentale qui est connectée à un crime sérieux ne sont pas des criminels. Et ce n'est pas le Parti libéral qui a inventé ce principe. C'est un principe qui est basé dans la justice naturelle de notre société depuis très longtemps. Et c'est pourquoi je dis, Monsieur le Président, que quand nous voyons l'équilibre qui n'est pas dans cette loi, malheureusement, nous ne pouvons pas l'appuyer. Mr. Speaker, I have spent, particularly the last few years of my political life, campaigning really for people to understand better the nature of mental illness, the importance of getting rid of stigma, the importance of understanding that the mad individual is not necessarily, and in all circumstances, somebody who is to be incarcerated for an indefinite period of time. And for us to understand that we've gone through a steady evolution over the last 100 years in understanding how important it is to treat, yes, the causes of crime, just as truly as we treat crime itself. If I believe that our current legislation denigrated the importance of public security and public safety, I would agree with the government and I would agree with the New Democratic Party. But that simply isn't the case. It simply isn't the case to say that these review boards are conducting their work as if public safety was of no concern or of no consequence to them or to anyone else. I think we've allowed certain mythologies, certain stereotypes to take over, and we're failing to recognize the real risks that apply to this legislation. I was interested that Mr. Sapers, who's the Corrections Investigations Officer for the country, expressed concern about this legislation, saying, in fact, it would increase the number of people who are mentally ill in jail and not decrease that number. Mr. Speaker, I may, at the risk of being even further stereotyped by my colleagues in the other way, say this. Shakespeare said it best, "The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptred sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself. An earthly power doth then show like as God's, when mercy seasons justice." Let us never forget, colleagues, that mercy must season the justice that we seek. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.